advice to me. Like, don't stick a fork into an electric socket. Don't put a hand on a red hot stove. That's not what we mean by common sense. Common sense is an internal sense that unites the other five senses. Right now, all of you poor souls have the misfortune of listening to me, and you're also looking at me. More misfortune. How do you know what you're hearing and seeing is the same thing? It's a common sense that puts together what our eyes see and our ears hear and what this poor soul has the misfortune of even maybe smelling. So it unites the five senses. But the common sense does a little bit more than that. It really puts us in touch with reality. Because there's another aspect to this common sense that is common to all of us. If those people in the back can't hear me, they can turn to Father Jeff and say, "What'd he say?" Because they believe that Father Jeff is hearing the same things they're trying to hear. This common sense is even shared with the animals. This is why we have guard dogs. Because when that dog starts barking, we know that he senses something. So we go out, maybe with a shotgun, to investigate what the dog's barking at. And we can sense the same thing. The common sense puts us in touch with reality. The things we are talking about tonight, the voices we hear, are not common sense. They're something that we as individuals hear that no one else hears. Are they real? Is the question. So to start answering this question, I want to begin with mental health issues. Of course, when somebody has a mental health episode, it is somehow a break with reality. Something's wrong maybe with the common sense. This is an illness. So please, when you encounter somebody who's struggling with mental health issues, think of it as an illness. Avoid terms like calling them crazy and so on. It is a heavy cross for the person bearing it, and it's also a cross for those who love them, and are trying to help them live through their mental health episodes. But one of them in particular, called schizophrenia, is often this experience of hearing voices. Now, I've only experienced role-play kind of episodes with this, and there's way too many here to try this out. But this was done with NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Health. They put on a course occasionally called Mental Health First Aid. If you have a friend or someone who's going through some kind of episode, what you can do to be that first responder, if you will, to maybe get them to a professional, to get them from harming themselves and get them the help they need. And one of the role plays they did was of schizophrenia. They took 3 people. Thankfully, I had the easy part. The other 2 people, one of them was to be the person experiencing schizophrenia, and the other person was going to be their voices in their head. And all I had to do was just have a conversation with the person having schizophrenia. They took the person who was going to be the voices, took a piece of paper and rolled it up, and was given all sorts of statements and questions to speak into the ear through that paper. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but the person I was talking to couldn't converse with me. They were too distracted by the voices. At one point, as I'm trying to, hello, how are you doing? Just simple conversation, she turns to the voice in her head and says, yes, he's looking at me. Can't you see he's looking at me? She was so flustered by the voice. I think that probably did a decent representation of what people with schizophrenia may be experiencing. It leaves them confused, it leaves them bewildered, a lot of times, the voices that they hear are very negative, very almost breeding a paranoia. And hence you may encounter a paranoid schizophrenic, where the two are combined and they become very insecure around people who may even love them because the voices are saying all these negative things. This is very different from what I'm going to talk about in terms of the voice of God or the voice of the demon. But when you listen to these stories of people who go through schizophrenia, you can see how sometimes it's easy for them to confuse it with the voice of God or with the voice of the devil, or multiple demons, for that matter. One person described their experience of schizophrenia as like being in a restaurant, where you're hearing all this noise and conversation going on around you, almost constant. But occasionally, you can make out the words that somebody's saying. And usually those words that they made out were words that they thought were about them. Isn't she fat? Isn't she ugly? Why is she dating him? All those kind of things that were jumping out of this crowd of voices. So certainly be compassionate to anybody who is experiencing that. And if you think you may have it, please seek the help that is offered through so many professionals around town. National Alliance of Mental Health, NAMI, is a great resource. If you have mental health issues or someone in your family or friends have them. Of course, I know the university has a counseling center also. With that said, moving to the voice of God and other voices discerning. Are these real? They're real for the individual, but not in the common sense. And the scriptures are full of cases of it. A few weeks ago, the reason I was asked to give this talk was because of a scripture passage we had about which I preached, where the people tell Moses not to let them hear the voice of God. They wanted Moses to talk to God and then tell them what God said. They did not want to hear his voice. It was too frightening of an experience for them. They feared they might die from it. This also was then paired with the psalm that's on there. I think it's Psalm 95. If today you hear the voice of the Lord, harden not your hearts. Throughout the scriptures, we encounter people who talk to God, who do hear his voice. Of course, this is the way we were originally made, Adam and Eve. They walked with God. They talked to him. We were called to this relationship with him that was indeed very personal and very real for our first parents. Of course, the original sin leads to this separation, where now hearing the voice of God is a gift that is given to many, but maybe not all. Throughout the scriptures, other examples, of course, the book of Genesis is full of them. Noah, Abraham, all hear the voice of God. Samuel. Samuel first hears the voice of God in the temple where he's sleeping. He runs to Eli 3 times. You called me. I didn't call you. Only after the 3rd time did Eli realize that it was God talking to the youth, and told him next time he calls, respond to it. Speak, Lord. Your servant is listening. We have a very real sensory experience that Samuel had. He was talking with God. Other prophets who went to consult with the Lord, Jeremiah, Nathan are examples, that they took the time to pray and wait and listen until they got an answer to the Lord. And they usually present that answer as the Lord says. It seems that they were listening to the Lord and really hearing him. This continues throughout the New Testament. We see it. Best example probably is St. Paul and his conversion. He's traveling with companions. He sees They all see a light. Only Paul hears the voice. Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? The light was to the common sense. The voice, only Paul could hear. So, when we hear these voices, how do we distinguish who it is from? The first rule, and this, I was just telling somebody again, I sound like a broken record on this. Galatians chapter 5. Read it. It's St. Paul on the discernment of the Spirit. And he boils it down to the fruits of the Spirit. If we are following the Spirit's lead, we will have the fruits of the Spirit. Joy, peace, patience, self-control, chastity, list 9 of them. If we're not following the Spirit, if we're following this work, we will have the fruits of this work. You know what those are? Look at our politics and you see. Anger, factions, rivalry, jealousy, outbursts of fury. It's what's going on often in our own society because we're not following the Spirit. We're following the things of this world. When it comes to this voice and hearing the voice, that's the first thing to look. Paul didn't seem to question that this was from God, that it was truly Jesus Christ. His conversion is immediate, and he seemed at peace with it. It calmed him down from his anger, from his persecution of the Christians, and led to his repentance. We see the fruits of it. That would be the first thing, I would say. Discern according to those fruits, whether or not it's leading you to have the fruits of the Spirit or the fruits of the flesh. The second thing I would emphasize with the voices are the reality of knowing that voices from God will never contradict God. Is what the voice saying in accord with what we know from the church? In accord with revelation? If it's in accord with basic Catholic morality? If it is, it could be from the Spirit. But certainly if it isn't, it's definitely not from God and should be rejected. Teachings of the church are a sure guide for us. St. Paul says they're the pillar and bulwark of truth in his letter to Timothy. They will help guide us and help us in this discernment. If the voice is telling you to jump off a roof, it's not from God. If the voice is telling you to harm another, it's not from God. It's from something else. Either a mental illness or it could be demonic. We had a talk, I think it was last year, from the exorcist in Indianapolis, and he pointed out that even sometimes what may begin as something from God, like an apparition, voices, might later be hijacked by the evil one, disguised as an angel of light trying to confuse the person. So great discernment needs to be done in these cases if you're having such experiences. Now, I don't necessarily want to show of hands, but I suspect there's probably at least a few people who here in prayer have experienced the voice. I'll tell you my own experience. My own experience wasn't of God. I know who it was. It was more like Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc had experiences of conversing with other saints. Shouldn't surprise us. We talk about the communion of saints all the time. We pray to love. We're always asking for favors. Why should we be surprised if some of them respond verbally? So my experience was in my own discernment. After I was ordained, I was discerning whether or not I should go into the mission. Went to Africa for 10 years. In that discernment, I hesitated. I thought I was being called, but I wasn't sure, is this really from God or is this just what I want? We become a priest and travel the world. All paid for. So I hesitated to say yes because I wanted to be sure this is truly what I was called for and it was not my will. And a lot of that goes, well, that's a whole other thing. So I won't go there. But in the process of trying to figure this out, I'm sent to a program that was part retreat, part discernment, part preparation. This was in California. And we were in a Dominican priory. And their priory had an open courtyard in the center. And at the time, was about to start a week-long retreat. And I'm still no clearer on is this really from God? So I figured I probably need to do another novena. And the one who always helped me with novenas is Saint Therese, who's a little flower. And those who do a novena to her probably know that at some point, if your prayer is going to be answered, you will receive a rose. It certainly helped me finish my college degree and gave me the roses those times, so I figured this time it will work also. And as I'm thinking I should do this novena, I'm standing in this courtyard and it's some rose garden. And I remember kind of like looking up and saying, and these roses don't count. And so, the week goes by, I'm keeping the novena, still nothing becomes clear. I think we're probably about 5 or 6 days into the novena, and we're coming up on the end of the retreat. And I'm in that rose garden again, mindful that these roses don't count. And that's when I heard it. The voice that said, don't forget, I'm the patroness of missionaries. It struck me then that maybe those roses do count. And in part, it also kind of did a flashback over the whole of life. My home parish, where I grew up. Can anybody guess if you don't know?
Little Flowers.
Little Flowers. Dedicated to Saint Therese. My little sister, Molly Therese, named after the little flower. Mom had a devotion to her. Mom also had a devotion to Francis Xavier. Younger brother is Daniel Xavier, patron of missionaries. And it was like everything in life just seemed to be pointing to this moment. The voice was very clear, very real. And I knew only I heard it. It wasn't something perceived by the ear, but it wasn't from me. I knew that also. It was something other than my own mind thinking. Well, I still hesitated because who listens to the voices in their head? The retreat finished. I'm finishing up the novena also, and people who know me know that it's ironic. My psych profile labeled me an isolationist, loner, and rebel. And yet I was in charge of social events for the group. My suggestion the one night is let's all take a deck of cards and go play solitaire. But one of the tasks I had was to organize a trip to a winery for some wine tasting. I had to be the designated driver. But we organized it to go to the Mondavi winery in Napa Valley. And we get there and the tour guide meets us and apologizes first. Explains, oh, sorry about all the mess and the commotion in the courtyard. Every Saturday night, we set up a concert. And they're setting up the sound system and the chairs right now. So we'll just move around it. So we proceed through the winery, and after we're done with the visit, they invite us to cross the courtyard to the wine tasting facility. So as we're crossing the courtyard, they're testing the sound system. The music they play, I recognize right away from the mission. Robert De Niro, Jeremy Irons movie about Jesuit missionaries in South America. And the garden we're walking through, rose garden. That kind of seal of it. She didn't need to say much, but she said enough. And I think that's often one of the other things that usually happens with God. If he spoke to us like he did to Moses, would we still have a need for faith? I think God only gives us as much as we need. And usually when we hear his voice, it's just a few words, just enough that we need at that moment. I think the other things are more matter to be careful with. While in the missions, one of the big struggles, thankfully it wasn't in my mission, it was a neighboring mission. They had a struggle with a group that became charismatic. Now, of course, the charismatic group is in the Catholic Church. A lot of good comes from it. A lot of very good, faithful Catholics who are devoted to the Spirit and following the Spirit's lead. But sometimes what happens is the Spirit might get hijacked. That they are experiencing the Spirit, but it's not the Holy Spirit. And I think this happened with the group there, because this group became so convinced that they had the Spirit that they broke away from the church. They wouldn't recognize the bishop, they wouldn't recognize any sacraments. All they needed was that experience of the Spirit to guide them. I believe they did encounter a Spirit, but it wasn't the Holy Spirit. Again, that goes back to using what the church provides us to help discern these spirits, to be sure that we are truly following the Holy Spirit and not another spirit. Any questions?
So when Anton Zanderley died, he was the founder of the Church of Satan, and his daughter Zena published a critique online saying that he had forged the Satanic Bible from Ayn Rand. Was it maybe the Spirit of God that told her to do that?
She said it was the Spirit of God?
No, she didn't say that, but was it perhaps the Spirit of God that told her to claim that the Satanic Bible was a forgery?
I don't know enough about the case, and I really can't say in terms of her motive. Studying that text and the history of that organization is
because after she published the critique, a lot of people left the
I'll recall the words of Christ with, he's talking about, what was the book called again? The Satanic Bible. The Satanic Bible, its publication, and then the daughter of the man who wrote it came out later and said it was a forgery, and her testimony led to people leaving the church. Was she following a voice from God or what? And I'm replying, I don't know enough about this. That's not something we study in Catholic theology, not even in our ecumenical course. But what I would say in terms of the division there that happened, recall Jesus' own words about a house divided. This is when he's accused of being possessed by a demon because he's working miracles and performing exorcisms. And his reply, a house divided cannot stand. If it's by Beelzebul that I'm expelling demons, then certainly the house of Satan will fall. Not his exact words, but you can look up the gospel. because even though there's a hierarchy among the angels, and that includes the fallen angels, because of the fruits of their life, there's also going to be that animosity, those factions, and rivalry. It's everything counter to love. So with the devil, you're probably talking about dealing with issues of pure power. But as he revolted, you can pretty much suspect that he probably has those under him who are also going to try to revolt. The power of God is always greater. Lucifer, bearer of light, the original name given to the devil, was one of the highest angels, the seraphim. Who did we pray to squash him? Michael. He's only an archangel. He's among the lowest of the angels. Yet he's more powerful than the most powerful fallen. We as Christians, as Catholics, have nothing to fear from the evil one if we're living according to the church. If we're following what the church teaches, morality, and staying close to the sacrament. Certainly, the evil cannot harm.
Should we give any credence or any attention to voices or conversations you may have in dreams, or only when we're awake?
Good question. In dreams, through the scriptures, we see examples. Of course, Joseph, the son of Jacob, having the dreams that all came true. We see it with Daniel also, and then finally with Joseph, the husband of Mary. Even Peter has a dream in the Acts of the Apostles that he thought, the lowering of the canvas and declaring all things clean. I think those would call for the discernment also. And I think the first thing that I would do in terms of the dreams, well, in terms of dreams and in terms of voices, remember what I said about God giving us just what we need. He's not going to take away from us our need to have faith, our need to believe and to trust Him. He's not going to make it obvious to us. So in terms of the dreams, I think the first thing I would do is, when you have one of those crazy dreams, okay, why did I dream that? Oftentimes I know most of my dreams is somehow related to what happened or what I saw or what I heard or what I did the previous day. And it's like our minds are a messy desk. And all those experiences of the day are just piled up. And in the dream, we're reliving it, but we're probably putting it together in different ways. And that's why you wake up and think, where did that dream come from? But if God is speaking through the dreams, and if it is a matter of giving us what we need, I think He's going to make it more clear that it's going to somehow stand out from the normal dream. Joseph and Daniel only talked about a few of their dreams. I believe we dream every night. And we're talking about all of them. These must have somehow stood out. I hope that.
Not necessarily like a lucid dream, but somehow it will stand out that you'll remember it or make note of it.
If it's from God, He's going to want you to know what He wants you to know.
I'm going from that just in the prayer. I guess like our minds are kind of going out in my mind. I guess would you say that it's similar in that it could be from God or someone who can know it, or is it less clear how to come in and understand it?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, and correct me if I get it wrong. in terms of the discernment, if you are hearing the voice or having the dream, that somehow it's more clear who you're talking to, who's speaking,
Yeah, it's clear that it's not just me. Yeah.
and it's not just you. Good question. And I'm thinking back to my own experience, and the reality is with my experience and other people I've talked to who've had some experience of hearing a voice, they're in prayer. They are in conversation with the saint. I was making the novena to the little flower. Another case I heard of, they were in adoration. I believe they heard the voice of Jesus. Didn't say much, only a couple words. So we're taking the time to actually listen. And that's how I could easily identify. I'm going to the little flower, asking her. She gave me an answer. This other case, they were right before our Lord when they heard the word. So we're opening ourselves up to have this experience. Now, have I had this experience since? This is 25 plus years ago. No. It's not an everyday experience. It is a gift that God gives because we need it at that time. Just like any other private revelation. They're given to individuals at a specific time for a specific reason. So are hearing the voice of God or His Son to help us at those moments. Is it clear that it's not me? In my experience, I knew it wasn't me. And then other people that I've talked to, they knew it wasn't them. We had no concern about it being some kind of mental health episode because my case is one and done. Those are often chronic conditions. Now, could I have been mistaken and it could have been demonic? In my case, it really put me on ease. Again, having that fruits of the Spirit. This was the right decision, and I was at peace with it. By the way, I was at peace with it. My mother wasn't. But I silenced her by saying, you're a Paul. You're the one with the devotion to the little flower and St. Francis Xavier. You're the one always asking for favors. Don't you think we want something in return? Well, when she brought it up the next time and I reminded her again, she said, yes, I know, and I'm mad at both of you.
If someone feels that the voice is not from God and that it's something else, but they recognize it in the moment, is there like a deliverance prayer of some sort that they can pray?
There are plenty of deliverance prayers. Simple one, Our Father, deliver us from evil. The prayer to St. Michael the Archangel. If it becomes more common, there are other ones that I know the priest from Indiana, I'm forgetting do you remember his name, Father Jeff? Were you at that conference? He has a book. Maybe if you Google Indianapolis exorcist, that includes some of the prayers. Lambert? And I know he shared with us a lot of the priests that he shared with most of the priests a number of prayers that we can actually give out to people. And you can say on your own. And then there are prayers that you can ask for the priest to bless you. So, If you're worried about being bothered by any kind of demonic activity, the best thing that we can do to avoid the demonic is, again, leading a moral life and staying close to the sacrament. Using the sacramentals also. Have holy water in the house. Have religious objects on it. All those things are good protections, but ultimately if we're living according to the church, we have nothing to worry about. There was one missionary who told the story of a witch doctor who converted. He was in the habit of casting spells on people. And he was trying his best to cast a love spell on a beautiful young woman that he was interested in. And every time he tried the spell, he had a vision of her being protected by a ring of fire. Well, that really disturbed him, because usually how the devil seduces us is this sense of having more power, having more knowledge that's beyond our natural ability. Ouija boards, telling us secrets, telling us future. Those are things we're not meant to know. It's a temptation because we want to know. All men desire to know. Aristotle said that, and he wasn't even Christian. We have this natural desire to know, and some things we want to know, things we shouldn't know. That's one of the seductive powers that the devil uses. So he was trying to have this power over a woman, and he wasn't getting it. And that really bothered him because he was mad. He thought being a witch doctor would give him all the power he needed, and he realized there's something more powerful than what I am. And as he looked into what is different about this woman, what does she have that I don't have, he concluded it was she was baptized. And that led to his own conversion.
It's kind of like a multiple question. What do you do when you're having like persistent thoughts? And sometimes it might be a good thing. It's like, maybe if you're considering a job and you're being like hammered to say you should do this job inside your head. And so then you're like considering thinking about praying about it, like, is that from God? Or is that Satan making you obsess over something?
Very good question again. In terms of trying to discern, this is more vocational, is this thought to become career-wise, you probably run into it with courtship, to marry her, marry him, is this the one? Is it obsessive thinking? Is it from the devil, or is it from God? I think generally speaking, especially vocationally, I was talking to somebody earlier, I think our society does tempt us quite a bit with putting an emphasis on jobs. We need to keep the emphasis on what's truly important. And the vocations in life are not about jobs, they're about relationships. It's the relationships that are forever. The jobs that we have, maybe you have it for 30 or 40 years if they don't lay you off earlier. Maybe you'll even switch it a couple different times. Those don't really define us. Our society says they do. I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm a paleontologist. The relationships that matter are husband, wife, father, mother. Those are the ones that are with you for all your life. And that shouldn't surprise any of us because that's what it is. Father, Son, and Spirit. It's the relationship. That's whose image we're created. What's most important for our vocation is how are we going to relate to others? And I gonna be a father in the sense of spouse and dad, or am I gonna be a father in the sense of a Catholic priest? How I relate to everyone something. And that discernment, yes. Actually, you're taking me back to why I did that novena to the little flower part I didn't want to go to. I was ordained in '96. As I'm discerning going to Africa, my class, not in the diocese, but the seminary I studied with, there were 6 of us ordained that year. By '98, only 2 of us were still active priests. And one of the things I realized with my own seminary, and that's a long story, I'll give you the 2-sentence version, maybe one. I realized in seminary we were trying so hard to prove to the faculty that we were called to the priesthood that we weren't really discerning whether or not we were called. And I think that's why a couple of my classmates left. I got ordained, and I remember celebrating my first Mass, and it felt like I had been doing this all my life. This is what I was meant for. I suspect some of my classmates, they got ordained and realized I was it. And a couple of years, not even 2 years, they're out. So I did not want to make that same mistake going to the missions. I wanted to be sure this is what God is calling me. These vocational discernments are not easy. They do take time. And I think that's the first thing that we have to emphasize with ourselves. Getting married, becoming a priest or religious, this is not something you wake up and say, I'm going to be a priest today. I'm going to get married. No. Nobody should treat these relationships like babies. Take the time. Take the time to pray. Take the time to discern. Take the time to be critical. The story of St. Ignatius of Loyola is a good example on vocational discernment. He was a soldier injured in battle. He's recovering from his injury. Asked for a book to read. Of course, he wanted books about being a knight, being a soldier. Those are the things that inspire. All they had was a book of the life of the saints and the life of Jesus. So he read those. They kind of got him excited. He admired Francis and Dominic and thought it'd be great to do what they did. But his heart seemed to be more with being a soldier. So he put the books down and daydreamed about being a soldier. And he went back and forth with it for a while. But then he started to reflect. He was joyful, he was happy when he was thinking about being a knight. He was also happy and excited when he's reading about Christ and the saints. But he started to notice the difference later. And that difference was that the joy persisted with wanting to be a saint or to be like Christ. It did not continue when he was daydreaming about being a soldier. So eventually he leaves being a soldier and founds the Jesuits. Becomes a religious for the rest of his life. This again is at Galatians chapter 5, following the fruits of the Spirit. In terms of any kind of vocational discernment, what I often tell people is wake up one morning, spend the morning thinking about, okay, I'm going to marry her. Be honest about it. Think of all the good things and all the bad things that come with marriage. Yes, you may be thinking of the beauty now, but remember all those other things that come with being close with another person, such as body odors and things that may not be as exciting. think of the delights of having somebody with you through the hardships, and think of the hardships that it may bring. Spend some time with that in prayer, and then see how the day goes. If you have a good day, a joyful day, a day where you have those fruits of the Spirit, maybe this is your location. If you find yourself agitated or snapping at people and short-tempered and can't focus, maybe that's not your location. So if you have those kind of persistent thoughts, I would first take it to the prayer. Put it right there before God. You know, sometimes we think these persistent thoughts might be distractions. Well, if they're from the devil, if you give it to God, he's going to stop distracting you because you always keep turning to the one who wants to take you away from it. So put it right there as part of that prayer and bring this method of discernment to it, see how the day goes. So begin the day with these kind of prayers and then end it with looking back on how the day went. Thank you for that question.
At the beginning, you talked about the common sense, or the way that you put it, was originally before the fall, the voice of God and of the angels and the saints and everything, would you consider that to have been in the common sense? Or was that still like only God to individuals?
So Paul's asking about Adam and Eve and how they heard the voice of God. If it was a commonsensical or if it was more of an individual. And I think we need to ask Adam and Eve. My suspicion would be that it was a commonsensical. I'm not saying that with any kind of authority other than the authority of just trying to reason through, well, what are we made? And we're made for union with God. We're made to be the one body of Christ. And that this is where the fullness of everything is encountered. So, that Adam and Eve were both experiencing the same words at the same time. Whether or not God had to actually pound against their eardrums, I'm not sure. But that somehow it was a common experience for both of them. I'll probably write a philosophy thesis on that one. Yes.
Okay, so you brought up the charismatic church. I was at the Masters over the summer. I don't know if you know what it is. It's like a pretty charismatic camp. And like what they would teach both the missionaries and like all the campers is that like if you ask God a question, whatever comes into your head the first 5 seconds, like that's the Father's voice. And I was just wondering what your thoughts are on teaching God's voice like that.
Repeat the question.
She spent in Damascus, the camp, and she says one of the things they were teaching there is if you're asking God in prayer, whatever you hear in the first 5 seconds is the voice of God. I think I would encourage a little more discernment. It could be because, one, you're going to God in prayer. You're seeking Him. Is it possible for God to be hacked? Well, not because of God's lack of security on His communication systems, but probably because of ours. That if I'm going to God in prayer, but yet so much of my life is disordered already, can I really be sure that that's God? I would be a little more cautious on that. Yeah. Having these experiences are powerful. I served in a mental hospital down in Cincinnati. And plenty of the residents with their mental illnesses would talk to me about being God. Talk to me about things that they had done that I was reasonably certain they didn't do. Some of them talked about conversations with St. Jude and so on, where it was so over the top that they were where they needed to be at that level. But the experience is powerful, even if it is through a mental illness, that it can convince us, like in Africa, this experience of the spirit that they thought they were following. Convinced them they didn't need a mission. They didn't need a mission. They had the spirit and that's all they needed. The care to discern according to what St. Paul writes and what the church teaches is never done.
Time for one more question.
Yes.
So I had a question on, I had two moments where I was in prayer and it was something that came out, especially in adoration the last time. It was a thought that came out and he was exposed. It was what great gift it may be to forgive someone since it was a kind of a vocation potential. And then I know I guess I was wondering if God advanced to maybe using other people, maybe you don't follow up on using or following the signs he gave into your head, speaking to you in prayer, because the other day I had someone just look at me, no one I'd never met before. I was just in the church. It's like, become a priest, don't waste your life. They just looked at me, never met them before, and just said that to me. I don't know, that could maybe be God trying to.
Definitely. Definitely it could be from God. Notice my qualifier could be. But I'm also going to give you a warning on it. A friend of mine, convert to the faith, tells the story that he was at I think it was IU, Indiana University, and the Newman Center there had this guest priest come in. They were doing some kind of parish mission. Church is full. He's speaking, and he does vocation type of altar call, where he asked all the young men and women who thought they might have a religious vocation to come forward and be prayed over. And he was more of a charismatic fan. And he knew that he should go forward. But he was a recent convert who, prior to converting, actually led some of his Catholic friends out of the church. He thought more of a fundamentalist background, that the Catholic Church is a whore of Babylon. And then his conversion happened. He's still having this charismatic bent. He knew the Spirit was telling him to go forward, but that was too much for him. Recently became a convert. No, I can't become a priest. The priest who's leading the mission, after the people come up, he's about to pray over them, and he stops. And he says, I'm sensing somebody's resisting the call. His friend knew he was talking about himself. But he still resisted. Priest said more words trying to encourage whoever this person was to come forward and be prayed over. He wasn't moved. So eventually the priest continues, prays over all the people that came forward. They continue with adoration and with a procession. A friend's kneeling along the aisle as the priest is coming down with the monstrance. He gets next to the kid and right over his head. Priest says he didn't do that. My friend knows he didn't do that because he knew he should have gone forward. The Spirit was telling him that. Well, eventually he did go to the seminary, and then got kicked out. He had a heck of a time becoming a priest. Eventually became one is one. Yeah, if you want, I'll give you his name and number, and you can look him up. But he'll tell you the same story. But that's where I go back to God only gives us what we need. I often find that those who don't have to move on faith, that they seem to have the sure signs that, boy, I wish I had. It would make things so much easier. Have a harder time. They needed more. They needed more to persevere through all the what's the polite word for BS that he had to put up. Thank you. So, okay. So, Father Jeff, are we done?
You are not. We're here on the fourth Monday every month, so we'll be back on March 25th. Feel free to grab another beer. Don't forget to tip your bartender. And thanks again for coming. Drive home safe.
Why are you wearing gloves?
I'm biting my nails. I did that last year. I just bite the nail
I forgot my book bag.